All right, Alexander, let's talk UK politics. In the last video we talked about Johnson and his kind of apology or admission that he wasn't on top of things when he decided to have a party or get together or gathering, depending on whose point of view you take, in May 2020, I believe was the date, there on 10 Downing Street. Anyway, he is in big trouble. It doesn't look like he's going to last, but, while there are knives out for Johnson, there are also various people who are supporting him who are also starting to come out. So, I mean, we really do have quite an interesting mini civil war going on in the power struggle. Probably is a better term in the Conservative Party. But how do you think it's going to shake out?
There is an absolute power struggle shaping out in the Conservative Party. Now, we are at the moment hearing a lot about something called Operation Save Big Dog. This is apparently being carried out within the Conservative Parliamentary Party by Johnson's supporters in order to try to rally people behind him. And of course, he's the big dog that they're trying to save. And you see that also various prominent journalists like Charles Moore in the Daily Telegraph, some people in the Daily Mail, they're talking about how Johnson is this great election winner, how, the whole business about the parties, the Downing Street parties is being overblown, how it's not something that people ultimately care about, how anyway we're moving towards relaxing restrictions in the first place. So isn't it rather bizarre that we should be fretting about what happened then? So we have that side. But then, of course, we also see that there are growing, the very fact that there's an Operation Save Big Dog underway, that it shows that there is also an operation to try to bring him down, because otherwise you would need an Operation Save Big Dog. And you can see now certain people are clearly moving in order to try to bring Johnson down. Firstly, we've had backbenchers like the very important and powerful backbencher Ian Duncan Smith, a fervid Brexiter, a former leader of the Conservative Party. He's now openly speaking out against Johnson. We also see that Rishi Sunak, the cabinet minister, maintained days of silence and has now put out a statement, finally, seemingly supporting Johnson, in which he says he believes Johnson. But that's, again, very qualified. Saying you believe someone doesn't necessarily mean they're telling the truth. Always bear that in mind. These are the sort of evasions that British politicians are extremely skilled at. And perhaps even more concerning for Johnson and his supporters are rumours that Michael Gove, who is a very, very powerful cabinet minister, he was the nominal head of the Leave campaign during the Brexit referendum. He was, supposedly above Johnson. They were friends at one time and allies, and then they quarrelled, and Gove blocked Johnson from becoming Prime Minister after the referendum in 2016, so that it took another 3 years for Johnson to repair his position and take over in 2019. Well, Gove is apparently out talking to Conservative MPs, telling them that Johnson's position is becoming untenable and that he's the man who's in a position to take over and to right the ship. So you can see that we are now in a pre-coup situation. My own guess is that at some point within the next few weeks, there will be a formal leadership challenge announced. Whether Johnson will survive it or not remains to be seen, but even if he survives, he could be politically so damaged that it might make his position extremely difficult.
All right, so what exactly does a leadership challenge mean, though? I mean, are people voting for who's going to be in power?
Yeah, what there would be a group of Conservative MPs. You have to have a certain number of them. There's a fixed number. I'm not quite sure how many. It is about 50, I believe. Conservative MPs write to the chairman of the 1922 committee, who is in effect the chair of the Conservative Parliamentary Party, saying that they have no confidence in the leader of the party. The parliamentary party then has a vote. If the leader wins, he remains leader and therefore, in Johnson's case, prime minister. If he loses, he basically has to resign. That's my understanding of it. So that is what I think is in preparation. Most people feel, I think, that at the moment, if there was such a leadership challenge, Johnson would win. But the point is, even if he won, the very fact that a challenge like that had been brought at all would be a sign that his leadership was crumbling. And if you remember, going back to Theresa May's day, when Theresa May faced a similar leadership challenge, she won. She actually got most Conservative MPs to support her, but she was so weakened politically that within a few months she had to resign. So it's the same kind of playbook. I would add that Johnson himself is trying to preempt some of this by apparently preparing some kind of a purge. So the story is that he's going to purge some of the permanent officials in the government, some of the top-ranking civil servants and political advisors who work for the government and who he's going to blame for the parties and all that sort of thing. So that's part of his idea, but it's quite likely that he's also planning a purge of some of the top ministers who he's probably afraid might want to lead such a challenge. The risk is that if he purges them and throws them onto the back benches, then they're more free to organise against him from there. And that could complicate his calculations also.
Wouldn't a leadership challenge, I mean, I don't know if it's done in the UK, but that type of scenario, wouldn't that be impetus for snap elections? Or is that a mechanism that is afforded to the government?
It is, absolutely. And many people think that it's quite likely that if there were such a coup and a new prime minister, let's say it's Rishi Sunak, who does seem to be the most likely, or it could be Michael Gove. Let's assume it's one of those. Liz Truss seems to be fading, I should say. But it's quite possible if they have a political honeymoon that they would call a new election. I mean, that's quite likely. And of course, the Labour opposition is almost obliged in that kind of situation to say that a new election is needed because, after all, the Prime Minister had been removed. So what electoral mandate does the new Prime Minister have? So it would almost certainly hasten the day of the new election, and it might very well lead to a new election. It's not an absolute foregone conclusion, by the way, that there would be a new election. When Gordon Brown replaced Tony Blair, there were calls for an election, and Brown considered one, but eventually decided he wasn't going to go for one. A big mistake, in my opinion, and many people's opinion. And of course, he then carried on for several years, so only to lose even more badly in consequence. So it's not a foregone conclusion that there would be a new election, but I think there'd be pretty high chance that there would be.
All right, so we've done many programs on this, and we've talked at great length about Rishi Sunak, the type of politician he is, some of the risks that a Rishi Sunak government would pose with regards to Brexit, sliding. Not that Brexit's going to be overturned, but moving the UK once again more into the EU's orbit. We've talked about the risks involved with mandates and digital IDs, and perhaps implementing a plan B, which Boris wisely backed off of. Who is Michael Gove? What do you think a possible Gove prime ministership would mean for the UK and for various big topics like the UK's relationship with Europe, foreign policy, as well as digital IDs, mandates, authoritarianism, two-tier society, stuff like that? I mean, what kind of politician is he, in your opinion?
He is an extremely clever man, and he is also a fervid neocon. I think the second is the first point to make. He was an open admirer, for example, of Tony Blair, and when Tony Blair launched the Iraq war, he wrote a now notorious article in the London Times in which he said, "I love Tony Blair." So that gives you some idea of the kind of person that Michael Gove is. He's also, however, extremely intelligent. He's, by all accounts, a very capable manager, and he does come across as rather cerebral and intellectual, more, I think, than he deserves to be. I don't really take that very seriously, but he is a neocon. He is a rather soft Brexiter, not very different, I think, from Sunak in this respect. He does have a long history of being a Brexiter, but as I said, I don't think he's a particularly strong one. And I think that, to be straightforward about it, I think he comes across as rather aloof and would not be hugely popular in the country. But for me, the thing that always stands out about him is that, as I said, he's a very, very fervid neocon. He also has a reputation, like many neocons do, by the way, of being a compulsive intriguer.
I've got a question, but I don't want to put you on the spot. I'll throw it out there. Maybe you'll have a diplomatic response for it. Who do you think is the lesser? Because they all sound like bad options, to be honest. But who do you think is the lesser of all evils? So that's an expression. But who do you think's best positioned? Let me rephrase that. Who do you think's best qualified or positioned to take over for Johnson and would do the least amount of damage?
Well, I think Gove is definitely the cleverer man and would probably run a better and more streamlined government. But having said that, I think he's also a more dangerous man, to be straightforward about this. I think he's the sort of person who might make accommodations with the EU and might be able to sell them to the Conservative Party and to the country, and who would also quite possibly lead Britain into all sorts of disastrous foreign adventures. So though I don't like Sunak at all, and I think he's a rather troubling and difficult person, but if the choice had to come down to a choice between Gove and Sunak, I would still go for Sunak. Somebody who's able to write an article saying, "I love Tony Blair," and has never repudiated it, by definition, is disqualified for me. I think that is very indicative of the sort of person he is.
Maybe Boris is the best option in the end.
Lots of people are now saying this. Actually, it's quite interesting. We say that he's fatally wounded in a kind of odd way. One almost senses that over the last couple of days, as more Conservative MPs have looked at the alternatives, they're starting to think, well, maybe the alternatives are so bad that we're better sticking with Boris after all. The man has shown that he can win elections. He's shown that he can come back. He's obviously got many personality flaws and leadership flaws, but at least he's not Sunak, and at least he's not Gove. My impression is, by the way, that Gove isn't particularly popular in the Conservative Parliamentary Party either. So Sunak has a kind of glamour which I don't see, but which some people pretend to see, and he might appeal to some people. But I think on balance, increasing numbers of them are starting to think again about, well, maybe sticking with Johnson is not such a bad idea after all. Or at least it's the least bad option. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at least until they could field someone that's appropriate. It just sounds like there's no one waiting in the wings that would do the job.
No. I think that if Kwarteng had come forward, he would have perhaps been a more formidable challenger than all of them. But I think very wisely he's looked at the situation and he said, "This isn't my moment. If I come now, even if I win, I will do so from such a weak position that I won't be able to consolidate myself as Prime Minister over a party that has become so fractious." So I think he's holding back, and the result is that the field is being left open to people like Sunak and Gove, and perhaps, I presume, still Truss. And I think when people take a hard look at them, maybe they say to themselves, well, better stick with the devil we know.
A lot of palace intrigue there. All right.
Conservative Party revels in this sort of thing. I mean, the fact that Margaret Thatcher was able to hang on for 11 years is, I mean, it shows you what a formidable politician she was. I mean, it's very rare for Conservative MPs to keep going for that long. Even Churchill, in his heyday, struggled to keep control of the party. I mean, he was constantly exposed to plotting from all kinds of people because Conservatives are, they're very focused on power, and that means power within the party as well as for the party in the country. So they're always an interesting party to watch.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right, we will leave it there. The Duran.locals.com, Odyssey, BitChute, Rumble, and Super U is where you will find our videos as well. And use the code GOODDAY at the Duran shop. 10% off all merch. There's the mug.
There's the mug.
Use that code at checkout. Take care.